There we go.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Marine Fish Conservation Network's Waterside Chat. I'm Tom Sadler, the network's Deputy Director and your host. This afternoon, it's my pleasure to welcome my friend, Rick Crawford, to the show. Rick is the owner of Emerger Strategies, creator and host of the award-winning podcast, The Sustainable Angler, and founder of the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance, a coalition group committed to going carbon neutral by 2030. This afternoon, we'll be talking about fly fishing, climate change, and his business, Emerger Strategies. Got a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll do our best to get to them. This broadcast is being recorded and will be available on YouTube, Facebook, and our website in the next day or so. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome, Rick. Why don't you start with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey, Tom, and just wanted to take a moment here to say thank y'all for having me. I'm excited to be here, but yeah, you pretty much nailed my intro, but a little bit of additional background, I guess. I'm originally from Savannah, Georgia, and kind of give you the 30,000 foot view of how I started Emerger Strategies, I guess, would be I took a job out of college. It was the Great Recession, so didn't have too many great job prospects available, and randomly got a job at a guest ranch in Wyoming called the A-Bar-A Ranch. And my roommate was a fly fishing guide. So I got introduced that summer and just became really perhaps unhealthily obsessed with it, and enjoyed entomology and figuring that out, and learning how to read water and streams. And it was just really a really great experience. And so fast forward a few years later, and I decided that I wanted to somehow figure out a way to protect what I love through business. And so I went back to school and earned an MBA in sustainable business from Marylhurst University. And since then, I've done everything from installing solar panels to manufacturing biodiesel to working in the green building world. A couple of those were actually technology startups that went out of business. So nothing like the throwing yourself off a cliff and deciding to go for it and try and marry what I'm passionate about, which is fly fishing and sustainability. So I launched Emerger Strategies after, in 2016, I'd kind of taken a look at the fly fishing industry, and I saw that there were companies, donating to conservation, but I didn't see many of them cleaning up their own act. And so I thought it might be a good opportunity to try and help them with that. So that's where we are now. And along the way, I started a podcast and the Sustainable Angler, and as well as the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance. And so that's maybe that was 100,000 foot view of how I got here, but that's how I got here.
That's awesome. So maybe I didn't catch it. Where did you go undergrad?
I went to school in Savannah at Armstrong Atlantic State University, which is now I don't think it's now part of Georgia Southern University. I guess they were acquired, but back then, that was actually probably when I first started getting interested in environmental topics. I took a lot of environmental sciences. I was a liberal arts major, which is another way of saying I have no idea what I'm going to do.
That's me. Avoiding the draft and being a liberal arts major.
Yeah. But I did really enjoy those environmental science classes, oceanography and geography. And that was probably what planted the seed, other than always enjoying camping and fishing. And and boating. So.
Do you come from a family that hunts and fishes and boats?
Yes, not so much on the hunting side, but on the fishing side. My grandparents had a dock when we were growing up, so it was low country boils and chicken necks and blue crabs and redfish off the dock, and so those are probably my earliest and happy memories of being young and having fun and eating what you catch and having some fun doing it. So that was the entry point for me.
And the Low Country is where you grew up?
Yep, grew up in Savannah, Georgia. Technically on an island, Whitmarsh Island. It's an interior island on the way to the coastal beaches, Tybee Island, and on the Georgia coast. So just 10 minutes from Savannah downtown. But yeah, grew up there, born and raised. And, everyone always says, if you're the Pluff mud's in your blood, and if you leave, you'll be sure to come back. And that has remained true, because now I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. So couldn't get away from it.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, I guess the simple question is, why would you want to get away from it, right? I mean, it looks, at least from your background picture, it looks like it's a pretty nice area. It might not be quite as nice as a dry river in my background, but better than Collins' office in Washington, D.C. So let's talk a little bit about emerger strategies. I'm kind of fascinated how someone with your background and a passion for fly fishing and bringing that environmental nexus, and it's not the traditional way that people would get into the sustainability environmental business. And so talk to me a little bit about what you guys do, who some of your clients are, and then I'm going to get to another favorite question about some publicity you recently had.
Okay, all right. Well, I would say, and I will forever mention this because it's got to give credit where credit's due. But reading "Let My People Go Surfing" by Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard was that was sort of the light bulb moment. The aha moment where I was like, okay, so we can actually use business to solve social and environmental problems. And that just really resonated with me. And I was just like, for me, it was falling in love with fly fishing, and I lived out in Jackson Hole for a few years. And, when you get to have those types of experiences, you want to ensure that those public lands and those natural resources are protected. So initially, selfishly, I started my company to protect what I love. And what we do, we're a sustainable business consultancy, and our mission really is to measure and improve your sustainability performance, help you reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions, and help you tell a compelling story to your stakeholders. So whether that's investors, customers, employees, and we help our clients pretty easily make the business case for sustainability. They want to attract and retain talent. Well, there's not much of a better way to do that than to be environmentally responsible. They want to differentiate themselves from competitors. It's certainly a way to do that in a positive light. They want to reduce operational costs or run more efficiently. And it just so happens that there's a direct correlation between running your operation efficiently and reducing your carbon footprint.
Do you find that, I mean, as I guess I would say as a business savvy or interested person myself, it's that bottom line opportunity, way to improve your bottom line. Does that resonate pretty well? I mean, do you find that's the and maybe I'm leading you here with the question, but it is, if as someone who might look and say, well, why do I need to do this? You know, I'm going to guess that the bottom line improvement pitch helps get people to that case. And is that true? And do you find it that way, or?
You know, I have found that it's actually a lot of companies that and clients that I work with, they do it altruistically, or they do it for the right reason to begin with. And the economic bottom line component of it winds up being an added bonus.
Really?
They're pleasantly surprised that that is an end result. And so they see increases in sales, customer loyalty. But what started to happen really in the last 2 or 3 years even is that, and there's all sorts of studies that back this stuff up, but you know, MBAs, the vast majority of them, if they're considering working for 2 different companies, they're going to pick one who's got a better environmental record, all else being equal. So you're able to attract and retain that talent. You're also able to, as I said, customer loyalty is a big one. So that one customer who was maybe going to buy one product from you is now going to buy it for their friends because they believe in the mission. So you're seeing an increase in sales. And then if you're a manufacturer, for example, like Z-Man Fishing Products is a client of mine, and they just put up a huge solar array at their headquarters here in Charleston, or just outside of Charleston.
Right.
But that's when you start to see, as a manufacturer, you're going to significantly reduce your operational costs, and then that has a direct impact on your carbon footprint from an operation standpoint. So probably a long-winded answer for when we talk about sustainable business, what we're really, it's not just the economic bottom line, but it's also your social and environmental bottom lines. That's also known as the triple bottom line, and that's sort of the from a business standpoint, that's what people really mean when they're talking about sustainable business. You hear it called ESG now. It used to be corporate social responsibility. It's just more or less the evolution of that concept of saying, wait, we need to be measuring not just our economic bottom line, but what is our community impact on the social side of things? Are we, how do we give back? Do we volunteer? What resonates with us as a customer, or what resonates with our customers for nonprofits that we can support and volunteer with? Similarly, on the environmental side, carbon footprint is probably the biggest KPI, but you're also looking at trying to achieve zero waste, and now there's a big push for even being water positive. So and then your supply chain, and that's the hard nut to crack. But you start with what you can control and look at your energy waste, waters, see how you can improve that. That typically will show a economic bottom line result as well from a reduction in operational cost.
That's I guess I'm going to show my age. That's somewhat surprising to me, but very encouraging, because of course my aged brain immediately goes to the economic bottom line. But to hear you say that corporate America is beginning to recognize that it's not just reducing their costs, but making that retaining employees, making it a place that people want to work because it's environmentally responsible place to work. And that's very encouraging to me. And I'd like to think it bodes well for the future. So you and I share a profile, if you will, in one of my favorite Southern magazines, Garden and Gun. How did you get into that one? Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Just like everything else in my life, I'm doing better than I deserve, and dumb luck.
Yep, I can relate to that.
But yeah, I got an email from T. Edward Nickens saying that he spoke with Hillary Hutchison, and that I might be a good person to interview for an upcoming issue. And after I got done pinching myself, I happily accepted the invitation, and that was pretty neat to see. I'll have to say I was very surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it's for our viewers who don't know, Garden and Gun was a startup magazine about 10, 11 years ago that is probably one of the more interesting success stories in the magazine space, and has got a very loyal readership, and it's because it's interesting title, Garden and Gun, but it's really talks about Southern lifestyles. And I bring it up because for you, Rick, I think that's a very much of a badge of honor to be profiled in that level of a magazine, and so kudos to you for it. And I was thrilled to see it in my most recent issue. So couldn't get past. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. It was it really is an honor, and it also speaking of hope, it also gives me a hope that a magazine of that caliber and readership is willing to talk about sustainability and climate change. And I don't think that that would have happened even 5 years ago. And so I think that that's a good sign that people are coming to terms with climate change, and it's self-evident at this point. It's pretty clear if you live in Charleston that sea level rise is happening. So,
well, I'm going to come back to sort of the local angle here, but I want to talk a little bit, or have you talk a little bit about the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance. Both of you and I are big fly fishermen, and so talk me through, sort of how did it get started? Who are some of the members? But more importantly, sort of what the goals and reasons for doing or for having the alliance, and sort of the processes involved, and we'll come at it a couple of ways that way, if it's okay.
Yeah. So it got started. So I launched Emerger Strategies in 2016. And after a couple of years of bringing on clients, while the work we were doing was good for those individual clients, and I could do that indefinitely, I asked myself, was this really having the desired effect? Like, does this even matter what I'm doing? If a handful of companies reduce their footprint, and they're relatively small to medium enterprises. And I came to the conclusion that it wasn't really going to do that much good. So really what I wanted to do was, this also happened to be right around the time that that our first child was born, and really had me thinking about how I grew up and how I want my kids to grow up, and decided, well, wouldn't it be probably a much more effective way if we were all working towards a common goal? And so that was the idea. And I went to IFTD. This would have been in 2019. And I pitched the idea during their board meeting and said, I think that y'all should align around this, and the future of your businesses in this sport is dependent upon it. So it makes sense that we should address it. And I got enough support from that meeting and walking around that I thought, okay, well, we can do this. So I was in the middle of COVID, so I figured, what else do I have to do during a lockdown besides to start something new? So we launched the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance in like May 2020, I think. And it's basically looking at what the science says. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is peer reviewed by thousands of climate scientists, say that if we do not halve global greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and be at net zero emissions by 2050, our planet will warm above a 1.5 to 2 degree Celsius threshold, at which point the effects will be catastrophic. So it was based on what the science is telling us that we must do, and then saying, okay, well, let's align with that. And initially what we did was said, well, we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. And what that means is that every greenhouse gas that we emit, we're going to make up for it largely through the purchase of carbon offsets, although some of it will be from reducing our footprint. Without probably boring everyone to death about the intricacies of greenhouse gas accounting, what I will say is that that field is rapidly evolving, and we've recently actually rebranded to say that we are going to align again with the latest science and be net zero emissions by 2050. So what's the difference between carbon neutral and net zero? It means that you're going to measure your footprint, and carbon neutral means we're mostly going to buy offsets to achieve carbon neutrality. What net zero means is that we're going to measure our footprint, and then we're going to commit to reducing our footprint 50% by 2030, and we're going to commit to achieving net zero emissions. So that's your operations and your supply chain by 2050. So it prioritizes reductions over offsets. Is basically what the difference is. And so a little bit, I don't know if that was helpful explanation or not, but we started with 16 members, Patagonia, Rep Your Water. So we're fly fishing guides, shops, lodges, brands, and nonprofits. So Kyle Schaefer of Soulfly Outfitters, for example, is a guide. Shops, Emerald Water Anglers, Driftless Angler, Larry's Fly and Supply. So those are some shops, some lodges. I'm excited. We just brought on South Fork Lodge last week in Idaho.
That's Oliver White's.
Yep, that's Oliver White Lodge. And Tailwater Lodge, Soulfly Lodge, Turnip Flats. And then on the brand side, Bahio Sunglasses, Rep Your Water, Patagonia, just to name a few. And we also have some affiliates like Fat Tire Beer, for example, who they're a carbon neutral beer. So it is, if we could move an entire industry towards net zero, then I think that one, we really don't have much of a choice, but to prove that it can be done, fly fishing, I think, is a small enough boat that you can more easily right that ship. And if you can prove that it can be done, then I think that will have I think it's a model that can be replicated, and something that other industry and trade associations will aim to achieve. Awesome.
I mean, that's, obviously having been a former board member of the American Fly Fishing Trade Association, which holds IFTD that you were referring to. I mean, I'm delighted to see this, and it's phenomenal that the industry is willing to take a leadership role in this. And the industry has always been willing to recognize that they're in it for a long play as opposed to a short play. It's not necessarily selling as much gear as they can, but selling the right gear to the right people at the right time. And, they've always been very habitat oriented. I mean, the matrix that we used to run policy issues through was access to healthy habitat created recreational opportunity that improved business. And so, I'm delighted to see the industry coalesce behind this kind of an effort. And I applaud you for being willing to take the leadership role, and the others that you mentioned, Hillary and Kyle and folks like that are, have been strong proponents. I know Orvis has been involved, obviously Patagonia from the get-go. And I remember your panel at IFTD, and it's one of those things where we kind of get concerned that the bell keeps ringing and people aren't responding to it. And we're obviously facing a very challenging time right now. But this leads me into my next question, which is, you live in the Low Country. And, when you and I were talking earlier, you see it day to day. I'm not going to see it probably in the mountains of Virginia in my lifetime, although my granddaughter and grandson who just walked in very well might. But so tell me a little bit about what you see, the actual effects of climate change. You talked about taking your daughter to school, so I'll prompt you in that direction. Tell us a little bit about what you see.
Yeah, so they don't call it the Low Country for no reason. So the water is going to show up here first when it comes to sea level rise, and so I have personal firsthand experience because my daughter goes to a preschool in downtown Charleston at a church, Grace Episcopal, and I have to get rerouted on days because the streets are flooded.
Really?
And the roads close, you get rerouted. It causes a lot of traffic to back up. And as a matter of fact, Roper St. Francis, the hospital downtown, is relocating because of the flood risk. So you're talking about significant changes that are starting to happen. And I think myself, like many parents my age, have gotten beyond the politics of this because you're going, I'm literally the one being rerouted to drop my daughter off at school because it's happening. And so it's not just like, that happens every once in a while. It happens frequently. And I think the way that we're talking about sea level rise is, I think it means that in the Charleston Harbor, the buoy reads 8 feet. And that will cause even sunny day flooding in Charleston. And we see that. And the same thing's happening in Savannah, where I'm from, and on the islands and the lower lying areas. So, like the road out to Tybee Island, for example, that'll get overtaken by water. And so it's firsthand experience. I see it, but then some of the things are anecdotal. We fish I especially love fishing for tailing redfish during flood tide. So for those not familiar, we have about a 6-foot tidal swing in Charleston, and on full moons and new moons, the tide gets about a foot higher. It floods the marsh grass, and redfish go into the grass to eat crabs. They're tailing. It's a great way to spend an afternoon. But I've also noticed anecdotally, though, on the tide charts are not right. So what they're predicting the tide to be, and you go to a flat that you're familiar with to fish, and it's either way deeper, because it's like, why is it so deep? Like, they was only calling for a 6-foot tide. This is like a 6'5", at a flat that I've fished hundreds of times. So there's other things that are anecdotal just as an angler, but it's also what we're literally experiencing, just trying to get around town.
That's I guess I nothing else I can say but disheartening. And I don't know. I worry that people are not seeing the seriousness in their day-to-day lives and aren't reacting to it soon enough. And so, which, puts a finer point on the notion that, you getting the alliance together, you doing the work that you're doing continues to be vitally important. And to the degree that the network can help amplify that message, we're delighted to do it. But I think, this is a tremendous challenge. And, I wish I had a simple answer, or I had a question that could get us to a simple answer, but I don't. And that sort of leads me towards you probably have opportunities to come to Washington and talk to people on the Hill. What would you tell them? What would you tell people who are in a policy-making role they should be concerned about?
Well, I think they got to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. That's what's happening. That's what's causing this. I think it's also important to note that, that was not the original intent of, this is a byproduct of something that has gone awry. And I think now it's time to say, okay, well, we really need to incentivize renewables in a major way. And I think that you're paying X amount at the pump for gas, for example. Well, that doesn't take into account any of the external costs to human and environmental health. So, and on top of it, it's subsidized. So that would probably be a big one for me, would be to say, well, you want to let the market decide what's the right move? Well, ask people to pay the real cost of fossil fuel, and renewables are going to be a real attractive, and electrification of transportation becomes very attractive very quickly when no one can afford to put gas in their car. So I think that would probably be a pretty strong message. And then I think also that, the SEC is now going to start regulating ESG and climate disclosure data. And I think that, one of the things that I learned in with the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance was just getting people to even measure their carbon footprint is an accomplishment. I mean, people they don't even know what it is. So how are you going to manage something you're not measuring? And so I think that that's really important. And I think that people need to know and understand what their footprint is, so that they can then take those actions to begin rapidly reducing. And the good thing is that the solutions exist today. What we lack is political willpower, because they're owned by fossil fuels. And, it's a bad situation, but there's going to be people that are left on the right side and the wrong side of this. And I can tell you, as a father whose my home is the Low Country, I take this real seriously, and I take it very personally. And if you want to try and take this place away, my home, and the lifestyle that we live here, then you be prepared to answer and have some answers. And I think I think people are coming around to it, and they're beginning to understand this, that there's really nothing political about this. This is what the science says. This is what we have to do. Time to get off your ass and get to work.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And in listening to you talk, and obviously the passion and concern you have for this, it makes me think back to, the Kennedy days, John Kennedy days, when putting a man on the moon, or, even Biden back, I think while he was vice president, a moonshot on cancer. This seems to me, and listening to the passion that you just brought to this question, is that we really are not in a position to sort of see how this plays out, which it is, the resources, whatever they are, the removal of subsidies, the changing of the tax code, the commitment of federal resources. And federal resources, let's be honest, means our fellow Americans are going to pay more taxes, or some are going to pay more than they're used to. But we can't just hope that this problem's going to go away. Do you agree?
100%. And I think the other thing that is changing, climate science is very conservative. And so this is no longer something that is 100 years away. That was always, the next 100 years, we're going to see these things happening. Well, it's happening right now. And you can't tell me that hurricanes aren't more frequent and intense. You can't tell me that the sea level is not rising in Charleston. You can't tell me that there's an increase in hoot owl restrictions in Montana, and river and stream closures, and drought, and wildfires in the American West. It's happening now. So this wasn't 20 years ago when it was saying in 100 years this is going to happen. Well, it's happening right now. So the question is, are we going to mobilize and do something about this, or are we going to, just this is out of our control and hope everything's okay? And that's not okay. It's something that is preventable. It's solvable today with existing technology, and the only thing we're lacking is political willpower.
Well, I can't disagree with you on the lack of political willpower. And I can hope, and I can tell you that from the network's point of view, our intention is to continue to bang the drum and push for policies and activities that begin to seriously, not studies, but seriously address these kind of questions. And it's not going to come as a shock to you when I tell you I'm going to enlist you in that effort, or enlist in, or have us enlist in your effort. This is freaking critical. This has been a great conversation. I'm going to close out with returning to your and my roots of fly fishing. You are in the Low Country. You began to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities, but I also noticed that you fly fished in other parts of the world. Where, if you had to pick like your favorite place on the planet to go fly fish, where would you go? These will be quick questions, so you don't have to. Oh
God, I mean, that's such a loaded question.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Okay, well, I'm going to give a simple answer right here in my backyard.
Awesome.
There's nothing. I love where I'm from. I'm proud to be from the Low Country, and I love going out catching redfish, speckled trout, flounder. It's what I grew up doing, and I think if it all came back, I'd like to go redfish, have a few cold beers alongside a Low Country boil, and call that a good day.
Well, I think that's a terrific way to end today's conversation. I want to tell you how much I appreciate it. You have brought an important message, and I think people watching this will realize the passion and concern that's evidenced by not only your work, but how you present your message. And as I said, we will do what we can to help get that message out and join in those efforts to try to address this problem, because there is no option if we don't. There is no option if we don't. So, Rick, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to remind folks that this I don't even know what we call this, but this Waterside Chat has been recorded and will be up on our website on Facebook and YouTube. And Rick, if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? What's the way to get hold of you through Emerger Strategies or the Alliance?
You can send me an email, and I'm going to preface this. So check out the website, www.emergerstrategies.com. If you want to check out the Climate Alliance, it's flyfishingclimatealliance.org. That's probably going to be the best way to do it, because my email, here's a funny little story. When I first started it, I wanted the company to seem bigger than it was. So I put my name as R. Crawford at emergerstrategies.com, so people wouldn't think that it was just me. And in hindsight, a bonehead move, because that is a pain in the ass to tell people, R Crawford at emergerstrategies.com. So either way.